So he shows up at the retreat. Now, our youth minister happened to tell his brother, he's like, there's a young girl here who's thinking about religious life. So Roger comes up to me. He must have pointed me out. Okay, so Roger comes up to me. This is the first thing he ever said to me. Hi, my name is Roger. I hear you're thinking about a vocation, and I have the perfect community, and you have to enter because I owe them a nun. I was like, hi.
You know, Roger.
People often wonder who we are. Why do we dress this way? What do we do all day? Why do we live this kind of life? What does it mean to be a sister, a priest, a Catholic? We want to help you navigate life through faith to find the truth of God and all His glory, because the truth shall set you free.
Welcome back to our podcast, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And today we have with us a very wonderful sister, and she holds an important position in the mother house in which I live, and obviously she lives, but we won't tell you about that quite yet. So let me introduce Sister Catherine Marie. Welcome to And the Truth Shall Set You Free.
Thank you, sister. It's great to be here.
Sister, will you begin by telling us a little bit where you're from, a little bit about your family? There are many interesting things you could tell us, I know.
Sure. So as you know, I hail from California, and I grew up in the Central Valley, which most Californians don't know that the Central Valley exists.
Oh.
And that also means that it's kind of a different climate from what people usually think about California. So I grew up in Bakersfield, which is at the base of the valley. And I think I had a pretty normal upbringing. I was raised in a family. There were 3 of us. I am a middle child.
I'm a middle child.
Right?
Let's hear it for middle children.
That's right. I was going to say, I think I'm an atypical middle child because my brother didn't want to lead. He's the oldest, and so I took charge.
That might be a typical girl.
Right. So I have an older brother and a younger sister. And actually nowadays, my brother and his family still live in California. My sister has moved to Texas. But my parents raised us all in the faith. My dad is a convert. He actually converted. Well, he converted because he thought that he was going to marry a different woman who was Catholic.
Oh, how
but then it worked out great when he wanted to date my mom and marry my mom, who was like, no, you have to be Catholic. So he came into the faith.
That beautiful?
Mm-hmm. And it was actually, my dad plays a really interesting role in my vocation story because he's a convert. So I grew up in Bakersfield, California. I went to public school my whole life.
Wow.
And that was actually an intentional choice by my parents. In Bakersfield, there is a Catholic school, but at the time, my parents had kind of evaluated where they thought that their children would receive the faith the most and what would be the best context. And they decided that it would work best for us to go to public school and for us to receive the faith at home.
Wow.
So I grew up as, we called it CCD, religious ed. I grew up as a religious ed student.
Interesting.
And as a child, I knew what our faith was, and I knew who God was. And I wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say I was catechized really well. Like I didn't know the catechism really well. But I learned who God was from my mom's example.
Oh.
And my mom has always been just a seeker after God. And I remember when I was in probably around middle school, my mom started reading a lot. She discovered Scott Hahn. And she found that there was a way to deepen your faith through just reading. And my mom is we grew up going to the library every week. So she found that Catholic literature was an option.
So she's already steeping you in Dominican life.
Yes, very much.
Read, study, learn.
Yes.
Active mind, life of the mind. Good.
Exactly. We were raised reading a lot. So I have memories of coming home from middle school, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my life.
Beautiful.
And I would get home from school, and she wouldn't be in the kitchen or in the living room, and I knew where to find her. I'd go in her bedroom, and she'd be kneeling next to her bed, praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet every day.
Beautiful.
And I never asked my mom, but I knew it was always okay. I would just go up and kneel next to her and join in. And we'd pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet together. So my mom has always played a key role in kind of just nourishing the faith, actually for all 3 of us. My brother, too, he is raising his beautiful little Catholic family. And just all of us were raised knowing that God was more than just a concept and more than just a lawgiver, but that God is a person who we can know and love.
Beautiful.
And I learned that too, going to Mass every Sunday. I have memories of as a little child of after I had received my first communion, of receiving communion and my prayer just being, Jesus, please don't leave me. And actually not wanting to swallow the Eucharist because I didn't want Jesus to go away.
I know, you have to really concentrate. He is inside me now and nothing can take him out. But I do know that.
Yes, as a little child, I don't want Jesus to go away.
Oh, how
So
dear.
I am so grateful to my parents for the way that they raised us.
That is for sure.
And the faith that they gave us.
Now, sister, since you said you're a Valley girl,
yes,
that's what you've told us.
This is true.
So, did you grow up knowing any or seeing any religious sisters?
Sister, no.
Wow.
I look back and it's possible that I was around sisters at some point, but if they weren't in the habit and they didn't identify themselves. So as far as I can tell, the first time I met a sister was when I was in college and I went looking for sisters.
Wow. Tell us about that. Well, first of all, where did you go to college?
Sure. So I actually went to UCLA for college, which was not where I wanted to go.
Okay.
The only reason why I applied there was because my older brother had applied there 2 years beforehand, and he had gotten rejected, so he dared me to apply.
Funny.
And
How
I said,
God can work through anything, even dares.
right? So I said, oh, sure, I'll apply, and I'll probably get in. And I did. Not because I'm any smarter than my brother, but I did a lot more activities than my brother did.
I see. Okay.
So, and then I wanted to go to a Catholic university, but the way things played out, my parents were going to be the ones footing the bill for me, which was a huge gift.
Yes.
But it came down to it, and they said, unless you get a full ride, we really aren't going to be able to afford a Catholic school, but we can pay if you go to a public university. So I said, okay, all right. I'll look at the public universities, and UCLA was at the bottom of my list, but once I visited, I was like, this campus is beautiful.
It is a beautiful
campus. It's a beautiful campus.
Yes.
And really, this is embarrassing to say, but I pretty much made the decision based on that.
Oh, you did? So you were a typical Valley girl.
Yes, right?
What did you decide to study?
I actually majored in a major called International Development Studies, which UCLA no longer offers, but it was basically international relations, but you focus specifically on third world countries and how to help them develop. So I like to think, as I started discerning while still being a student there, my mind naturally went to, the missionaries of charity, of course, because that's what my major was gearing me toward, was looking at third world countries and how do we help people in third world countries.
Had you met missionaries of charity?
No,
you had read about them.
Of course. Everybody's heard of Mother Teresa, right?
Yes, that's for sure.
Yes. So while I was at college, my first year there was actually a real challenge because it was my first time being away from home. And my first time kind of transplanting into a brand new environment where I knew no one. Wow. I didn't know the area at all. Wow. And so, I guess my first time since kindergarten. Right? But we don't remember kindergarten and what it was like to have to make friends for the first time. And so when I found myself, I'm 18 and I'm away at college, and all of a sudden I had never thought about how do you make friends. It had always just happened. Right? And I always just, this friend led to this friend, led to this friend, led to this friend, and I got tons of friends. But when I was at UCLA, I found myself very lonely and all of a sudden uncertain of myself and who I was and what I was doing. And it just led to a lot of soul searching, right? Of wanting to know my identity, wanting to know where I belong in the world. And I knew that God had something to do with all of that. So kind of at the low point of my time in college, it was the end of my first year in college, I just realized it was like, I can't do this alone. Like I'm trying to figure out my life on my own. I'm trying to find the answer on my own. Did everyone hear that?
We can't do it alone. Don't even go there. It's futile and it's frustrating.
It is.
And it is lonely.
And the beautiful thing is that God, I think he uses those moments, right? To seek us out then. He uses that hound of heaven image, right? Like he's never leaving us alone. And it's those times when we feel loneliest that he's going to come and find us. So what happened was I My brother, meanwhile, he was going to school down in Orange County.
Okay.
About an hour south of UCLA. He was at UC Irvine. And he was having the time of his life. Not only was he thriving academically, he was thriving socially. He was thriving in his faith. And it all seemed to revolve around this youth group that he had started working with. Oh. And so I was kind of looking at his life, insanely jealous, because I had always been the one more successful, right? And now all of a sudden my brother is like thriving and I'm really struggling. This had never happened before. So I look at his life and I kind of add up the math. And I'm like, okay, so it all seems to add up to this youth group thing. So maybe if I could find like a youth group where there's like this youth ministry team that forms community, maybe that'll help me figure out who I am. So I reached out to my brother and I said, hey, could you ask your youth minister if he knows of any youth groups up in Los Angeles? Well, then I get an email from the youth minister. He says, hey, Matt told us you're coming to join us. I'm so excited. I can't wait to meet you.
Oh, my goodness. They've already paved the way for you. Well, now, that's good, youth ministry.
I know. This is kind of the story of my vocation, too. Is I wrote back and I was like, hi, I don't think my brother fully explained. I don't live in Orange County. I live in Los Angeles. I don't have a car.
He thought it was there.
I don't know what he thought, but I was like, I don't have a car. I can't get there. Okay. So his response was, you know what? Don't worry about it. Just figure out how to get down here this weekend, and then we'll go from there. Oh. I was like, okay. So I borrowed a friend's car.
Oh, my goodness.
I had very good friends.
Oh, my goodness.
Drove down to Orange County, right? And I remember meeting this youth group and that first night just seeing these high school students. So this youth group serviced kids who go to public school in Orange County, which is one of the wealthiest areas in the nation.
Yes.
And these kids have everything at their fingertips. And yet every Sunday, 100 to 150 high school students would come together for youth ministry. It was unbelievable. Oh. And you see what, no amount of money, no amount of power can satisfy the desires of our hearts, right? Exactly. They're longing for God. So, I'm looking at them and just realized that like this, whatever this is what I want. Wow. So come to find out, the youth minister, he actually lived in Los Angeles and worked in Los Angeles, 4 miles away from UCLA's campus.
Oh my goodness, sister, God just paved the way for you.
He did. So it worked out that he would pick me up every weekend. We'd drive down to Orange County, and he catechized me, sister. He taught me the faith.
God bless him.
Right. And it was through that, and that combined with the group of young adults that I got to know and live with and be in community with, that I learned what vocation is, that I learned what, and looking back, I realized my heart has always loved God above all others, but I never had anybody present to me that the opportunity of a vocation. And I remember at one point, I was with some of my girlfriends from the youth group buying textbooks for myself for my next quarter at UCLA. So we're in like the bookstore at UCLA, and we had just sat down on the floor in the middle of the stacks because we're college kids. So we're sitting on the floor in the middle of the stacks as we're looking for my textbooks. And I said, okay, can you explain this to me? We're supposed to love God with all our heart. We're supposed to give him our best. We're supposed to give everything to God. Why isn't everybody supposed to be a sister and a priest?
Wow, that came from you.
And that was my question.
Wow.
And one of my girlfriends, she said, you might want to look into some communities and just
good
see.
For her.
Right? And I was like, okay, I'll look into them. Yeah. And so that was what put me on the path of discerning. I actually went out looking for sisters. And so Google. This was the early days of Google, but I just Googled. Nuns in Los Angeles, probably.
Oh my goodness gracious. So who were the first sisters you met?
They were the Sisters of Providence. And then I met the Sisters of I think they're the Sisters of the Good Shepherd. They're an Irish community.
Oh, yes.
They taught me how to make tea. I had never really had tea before you buy it from the store. Funny. But they taught me how to put milk and sugar in my tea. I was like, this is actually really good if you add some milk and sugar to it. But, as I'm meeting these sisters, they were wonderful women. And you can tell their love for our Lord was authentic. But it's still like... It wasn't like a strong no, this isn't. It just was like they're lovely women. I don't really feel called to do anything more in this relationship, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what discernment really looked like. I didn't have any models around me, but nothing drew me to go back there again.
Now, don't you wonder how this particular young woman found our community in Ann Arbor, Michigan? Here she is, this valley girl in California. Okay, sister, you've got us curious. I know the story, but they don't. Okay.
It is a crazy story.
It is a crazy story.
Okay, so you're going to have to follow, okay? This is the connecting people. So, our youth minister. We ran youth retreats twice a year. We do crazy things like go out on houseboats or rent cabins up in the woods. And oh my goodness. Too much money, way too much fun.
Uh-huh.
So, on our retreats, our youth minister's brother would come to help out with the retreats. So, our youth minister's brother, Roger, was studying at Harvard Law School, okay? And he had met a girl, of course, who he had fallen in love with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only problem was that this girl, Carrie, had been discerning a religious vocation. She was originally from Michigan, and she had been discerning with our community.
Uh-huh.
So Roger decides he really, really likes Carrie. And so he's decided that he actually wants to pop the question to Carrie. But the problem is that Carrie has been discerning a vocation.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, you went to Harvard and you were able to meet Roger, and Carrie introduced you to, right? Now, this is what Roger told me. So he says that you told him that he was stealing a vocation and that he had to promise to replace her before he was allowed to marry Carrie. And the dear heart Roger, he was so sincere, and he said, I will find a replacement, right? Okay, so I don't know any of this backstory. I show up for our retreat.
But let me explain one thing.
Oh, yes.
I said he was stealing a vocation, meaning in reality, a vocation to marriage. But he did not know that I meant that, and neither did Carrie. But I reserved that because I wanted that promise from Roger. Okay.
So he shows up at the retreat. Now, our youth minister had happened to tell his brother, he's like, there's a young girl here who's thinking about religious life. So Roger comes up to me. He must have pointed me out. Okay, so Roger comes up to me. This is the first thing he ever said to me. Hi, my name is Roger. I hear you're thinking about a vocation, and I have the perfect community, and you have to understand because I owe them a nun. I was like, hi.
Good old Roger.
It was so dear. So dear. So I was like, okay, you know, maybe. I don't really think, maybe I'll see. So why don't you give me the contact information? So he gave me the email address, right? And by this point in time, I knew how it worked. You contact a community. You ask for the packet. There's the packet. And then they send you the packet. And then you decide if you want to do anything else. So I emailed and I asked for the packet. And it was you. And you responded, oh, hon, I can't wait that you're coming out on a retreat. We're so excited for you to come. And I was like, oh no, this is all over again.
I had already heard from Roger that he had found it. He had found his promise.
So I tried emailing back. It was like the youth ministry all over again. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I must have forgotten to tell you. I'm in California. I don't live nearby. I'm in college. And you were so, you just know when the Holy Spirit gives you the words. You didn't even entertain those concerns. You just said, hon, God will work it out. You just fly out on this day and we'll pick you up at the airport and we'll drop you back off on this day. And I just thought, I was like, I don't think I can tell her no. God, I guess I have to buy a plane ticket. And it was that simple. I was just like, I think I have to buy a plane ticket. Okay. And so I did.
You have a delightful story, sister.
And by the time I came out here, just meeting the sisters, it was instant. You know, the first time I sat down with you, the first words out of your mouth were, well, hon, what do you think? And the first words out of my mouth were, you know, sister, the community is really beautiful. I could see myself living here for the rest of my life. And immediately after those words came out of my mouth, I was like, what did I just say? Right? But I mean, really, the words they were sincere in the moment, and they're still sincere.
That is so beautiful. And everyone really notice this, that when you find your vocation, you desire it. And so Sister's vocation story is so beautiful about how God prepared you, and you always had an open heart. And step by step, he really did guide you. But Sister said she always prayed that she would be close to Christ. And if you begin that prayer as a young child and you continue that prayer, or whenever you began it, God will never not answer that prayer. And so your story, Sister, has so many miracles in it. And don't we both just love Roger? So you have to tell our audience before we continue, what happened to Roger and Carrie?
Well, I was telling Sister on our drive over here, I was so delighted because last week we got a letter in the mail. And it's not to anyone in specifically, it's to the Dominican sisters. And so it's a part of my job is to open up the mail that's just addressed to the sisters in general and then to correspond and respond to it. So I open it up and there's this letter from this 10-year-old little girl. And she says that my mom is Carrie Severino. She's either going to enter your convent or marry my father. I think she made the right decision. This is that couple. This is that couple.
Isn't that just so exciting?
And they now have 6 children.
Isn't that beautiful, Sister?
And they are doing a beautiful job raising their little family.
And so Roger is actually going to be giving us his daughters as well as you. I think that's a pretty good interest.
I think so, Sister.
I really do. So we really want to thank Roger and Carrie. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we owe you all a lot of prayers. And again, the beautiful thing is when everybody jumps on board to find God's will. Now, Roger definitely had a married vocation. Carrie definitely had a married vocation. But again, to have seen this interplay and the discernment, which is so important. Yes. And I have to say, Sister, when you came, I think I glanced at you and I said, oh my gosh, she's us. I mean, it was just so obvious, and also you have brought out so many, and then I'm going to hand it back to you, but you brought out so many important issues. First of all, to stay open. Secondly, to actually go look. Yes. And then thirdly, if God kind of drops it in your lap, then you go get the ticket and you actually do it. Because if you are sincere, that means with the heart, if you really mean every speck of your being, you want to do God's will, He'll provide. Yes. And He'll show you exactly where. Okay, Sister, now we spin forward a few years and we get to 2021. So, Sister, where are you living and what are you doing now in the community, obviously?
Oh, well, Sister, now I am living back at the Mother House and I'm serving as the community's prioress, which means that I help care for the Mother House and all the sisters that are living at the Mother House.
And that's a handful.
It is. We have about 65 sisters living there,
yes.
And half of them are in the novitiate and the other half are my direct care.
And Sister, we cannot thank you enough because your maternal view on everything and taking care of everyone is really beautiful. I do want to ask you, too, how did your parents respond to your vocation?
Well, this actually is something that's really beautiful because, again, you think about openness, right? So actually, in all honesty, my parents were really, really sad when I first told them that I was entering.
And that's always a good sign. That means she's loved. I like it when the parents are sad.
That's exactly
If they're happy, I'm a little bit like, what am I missing?
And that's exactly it. My mom had watched what had happened after Vatican II.
Oh, yes.
And she had her own sisters who had taught her, who she had loved. She watched them leave.
Yes.
She watched, and she watched their life become one of a lot of suffering and a lot of sorrow. And she was worried that that's what my life would be.
Oh,
and
God,
so,
love her.
Right. So that was her concern. And again, I mentioned my dad is a convert.
Yes.
My dad had no context. No context for what a sister is.
Not.
Right? And no context for a sister. What is a sister happy? All he knows is that they don't get married. So how can you be happy there? That you don't own anything, and that seems like a big suffering, and that they have to do what they're told. Like he had some from a reference of just sacrifice.
Bless his heart.
So when my parents came out for the first time, it was my second month in the convent. And they got to meet the community. They had a major conversion of heart, and they fell in love with the community. And the beautiful thing is that like that encounter, that meeting of the sisters, opened their hearts up to really the beauty of a vocation, to the point that 5 years later, my mom ended up in a really difficult medical situation. We thought that she had a terminal illness. Thank God she did not. But there was a period of about a year where we thought that she was terminally ill. And I told her at one point during that time, I was like, Mom, my heart is breaking that I can't be with you. And she told me at that point in time, as our family is suffering, she said, sister, I used to be so sad and miss you so much. She said, but now I am so grateful for your vocation. It has brought so many gifts to our family, so many graces for our family. I don't want you anywhere else than where God has you right now.
Wow. That is beautiful.
It's so
Did
beautiful.
all you parents listen to this, do you young people who are worried about your families, as we all are when we make that vocational decision, do you realize, as Sister just beautifully said, that her mother said, God has taken such good care of our family. And perhaps part of that reason is because her parents, willingly gave their daughter, and their daughter willingly let go of that security and entered a convent halfway across the nation.
Yes.
Sister Catherine Marie, you are just absolutely delightful, and I really want to thank you for being with us on our podcast, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, and you are a great challenge in many levels to these people who are watching this, who either know a young woman that might have a vocation and need to say something to her like Roger did, or parents who need to let go and say God's will be done because we don't really own you. You really belong to Him. And to the young women and men too for the seminaries, the young women for the convents who say, maybe I do need to do something about this. Maybe the only way I will find it is if I do what Christ says. Come and see. Sister, thank you. God bless you. And signing off from And the Truth Shall Set You Free, and very special blessings to each of you and your families.